Good afternoon, Dr. Mundkur, and warm welcome to you on behalf of APAC News Network. We are a media organization headquartered out of Noida, and primarily our focus is government, healthcare, education, enterprise IT, and BFSI. So, primarily today, what we would like to know from you is more in terms of the devices and the solutions that you offer. What are their use cases in different hospitals? We would like to know more about VMS. So, maybe the best way to start would be if you can update us on on your portfolio of devices and solutions that are currently available and what sort of use cases they are used in the hospitals.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on this network. It's a pleasure to be interacting with you all and sharing information about the Vios network, Vios monitoring solution. So basically, the Murata Vios monitoring solution is basically a very simple device, which you can put on the patient just below the left clavicle and connect it to the various sensors on the to capture the ECG. And by the patient's vitals, the physiological vitals, which is basically the ECG, heart rate, respiratory rate, pulse, SpO2, patient posture, BP and temperature, can get actually wirelessly transmitted to a bedside monitor, which is by the side of the patient. And from the bedside monitor using the hospital Wi-Fi infrastructure, it actually goes across the hospital. So the nurse or the doctor can see the patient's vitals at any point of time from anywhere in the hospital. So this makes it rather the workflow is so simplified that the doctor can monitor his patient continuously from anywhere. And this is precisely not a ICU grade monitor. What we have done in Murata Vios is we have positioned this device as a step-down monitoring system, so that we have the major ICU monitors available in all the ICUs from the various big companies. So we said that the monitoring in the outside the ICU, that is the HDU or the private, semi-private or the general wards, is something that which is lacking. So we said we can provide this particular monitoring on a continuous basis to the clinicians in the hospital, so that any point of time they can, if the patient condition deteriorates, they can actually take the appropriate action in providing emergency care to the patient. So that's basically the device to monitor the patient's vitals. Coming to your next question as to what are the use cases. Well, let me tell you one thing. Like what we have noticed, and it is known and acknowledged by everyone, is that there is no single platform which actually takes care of monitoring the patient vitals across the continuum of care. So if you state right from the patient in the ambulance coming into the ER, and then maybe going into the wards, and then coming out after the surgery into the post-op area, and then going into the private, semi-private ward, and then even going home. There's no single platform that offers this kind of a monitoring. So what the Vios monitoring solution does is it gives a single medical grade platform, an IoT based medical grade platform, which kind of takes care of monitoring the patient across this entire value chain in the hospital. So right from our device can be used in the ambulance, the device can be used in the ER, the device can then be used in the post-op, step-down high dependency units, or in the private, semi-private wards. And if the patient goes home in a home hospital scenario, a device can be placed there also, because of the nature of the design of the device and the technology that we use. Distance is not at all a challenge with respect to patient monitoring. The patient need not necessarily be in the hospital. The patient need not be wired. What we need is just our device and maybe a good Wi-Fi to kind of provide the patient vitals to the clinicians who need to see the patient.
Okay, thank you. You explained the use case, and also since it's as you are mentioning, it's outside the ICU. That's a segment or section which you are targeting. So, if I may want to understand, so it will not only be the hospitals, or is it also the clinics where you are looking at deployment of this solution? And if you can name some of the hospitals and other healthcare facilities where this has already been deployed.
Yeah, to answer this question, yes, our major customers are basically hospitals and clinics, we can say. So it's certainly not a home care device, pure play home care device, but I will explain what I mean when it's not a pure play home care device. What exactly it is, it can be used in a hospital and it can be a smaller clinic also. For I'll give a simple example that it can be used for in a hub and spoke model to connect the smaller clinics to the main hospital. So we have scenarios where we have a large hospital and they have got smaller clinics in the city. The smaller clinics have doctors who actually refer the patients who come and who need perhaps better medical care to the main hospital. And these smaller hospitals, these clinics may not have a monitoring solution. So what we provide is our monitoring solution can be placed in the smaller clinic. So the device and the bedside monitors placed in the smaller clinic, and through the Wi-Fi network the data can be transmitted to the main center of the hospital where the patient can be viewed. Although the patient may be 20, 100, 200 miles, whatever you say, the patient can be viewed from a distance. And in case the patient condition deteriorates, the main doctor or the main consultant in the main hospital can perhaps ask the clinic to kind of send the patient to the main hospital immediately, or they can perhaps send an ambulance to pick up the patient and bring him over there. So it is not limited to the big hospital itself, but it could be also smaller clinics. And we also have use cases where smaller hospitals have used it. It's not only meant for big corporate hospitals or etc. Corporate hospitals are obviously the better customers. They find more use of this particular device. But even the smaller clinics in smaller towns, in tier 2, tier 3 towns, where actually there is a challenge with respect to availability of nurse 24 by 7, availability perhaps of a good doctor throughout the 24-hour period. Our device can perhaps be used wherein even if the nurses are not there to continuously monitor, or the doctors are not there to be continuously monitored in the facility, remotely these patients can be monitored and any care can be provided when if there is an emergency. So these are the kind of use cases that we have, or these are the kind of scenarios where our devices can be used. And if you ask me which are the hospitals that are using it currently, we have a few marquee hospitals to our name. We do have, say, Max Hospital in Delhi, which is using our device. We also have Kasturba Hospital in Bangalore, which is using our device regularly. We are also in talks with a couple of other hospitals like Columbia Asia Hospital, Manipal Hospital, and also some hospitals in the north, like they got the Asian Hospital, where they are trying to use it for in a use case where the hospital they have a small clinic in UP, and this hospital is in Faridabad. So they want to monitor the patients in UP in that small hospital because they don't get good doctors in that small UP town. They want to monitor patients from this Faridabad facility. We are in talks with this hospital. We are trying to do some pilots there to prove them the proof of concept. But basically, that is the idea, that these are the hospitals that are using our device across the country. We also have a hospital in the Middle East which is using our device for the past 2 years now. So, and they are pretty happy. And we have been providing all support to that hospital remotely also. You know, these were the COVID times, so we actually could not travel to provide any technical support or operational support. But we have efficiently managed to do that remotely, and the customers are very happy with our remote services also that we provide. Besides that, I also want to add here, see, providing a hardware and a software, ours is a technology product. Beside providing a hardware and software that kind of does continuous monitoring of the patients, we also provide a remote monitoring service. We do have American board certified telemetry technicians in a small center that we have based out of Chennai, where we can take over the monitoring of the patients 24 by 7 by our technicians, by mirroring the central station monitoring that is in the hospital by our technicians in the center, and they can provide all the kind of information to the caregiver at the hospital, so that in case of emergency, if the doctor or the patient is not able to continuously monitor the patient on their own, they can actually outsource that activity to us also, and that way it actually helps them a lot. So it is not just providing the hardware and the software for continuous monitoring and the various use cases. We also extend this beyond beyond to provide, say, the remote monitoring services as an additional service to our customers if they are interested. This concept we are trying to work out in India. Not many are really shown interest as now, because I think they are a little apprehensive about a few factors. But I'm sure going forward, as the confidence grows in the product and in the system, I'm sure this also will catch up in the Indian market.
Thank you. Two areas I would like to ask about, two questions basically. One is, you mentioned this works with and in terms of sending the information to the bedside monitor and the centralized information system in the hospital. So my question is, how is this monitoring system in terms of integration uh, with uh, uh, with products from different OEMs, maybe, or different vendors? How is in terms of integration? That is one. And the second part is, since a lot of remote locations, you are saying it can work. An example you gave, bandwidth across India is not uniform, and it's a challenge. And these are very health related critical information. It's not an entertainment that
Yeah.
a few seconds lag can be tolerated. So, keeping that in mind, the bandwidth question, how do you ensure that that doesn't become a challenge?
Okay. What was your first question prior to this? I just.
The first question was on integration with
Okay,
devices
fine,
from
fine. Okay,
different
yeah.
vendors.
I'm sorry about that. I missed my mind. So, well, integration. See, our device has got all the physiological parameters. The 7 physiological parameters I mentioned. Our device can actually easily integrate with any of the hospital EMR or HIS if they are HL7 compliant. So that actually helps the hospitals in kind of seamlessly moving the data from their HIS to our capturing the information from their HIS to our system, and vice versa. Reduces the number of entries the nurses have to make with respect to the patient demographics, etc. So this works beautifully well. We have done integration in almost many of our locations. The Dubai location, we have done the integration. We are working on the integration in the Mangalore location I just mentioned. We have done integration in one of the Pune locations also. So we have done this integration with all HL7 compliant. So very particular, it's going to be HL7 HIS compliance. So as far as HI is concerned, it is that. When it comes to integration with other devices, well, there could be some challenges with that. That we need that we have what is known as open API system, wherein we can actually do the handshake with any system, provided the other system is ready to share their APIs, and we can do the handshake so that the information moves. For example, if someone wants to connect a BiPAP or something like that to our device, or any other kind of device that you can think of, well, if at all there is some way of the other device also has got an open API and we are able to kind of integrate and integrate, then it actually works in kind of seamlessly moving data. But with respect to HIs, it does. We have done it, so I'm very sure that this actually works beautifully. But with respect to other devices that could be in the hospital, we have not yet done. We were asked to do so, but many of the other devices were not that open in sharing their APIs for us to do the integration. So that's what the entire thing really didn't work. To your second question with respect to the bandwidth, yes, that's definitely a challenge. We do understand, even in why the smaller towns, even in larger towns, and there are some pockets where you don't get good signal strengths. But over a period of time, I find we have really overcome that. Like when we did home hospital uh, kind of a use case in one of the southern states of the country, we did the trials. We found, yes, they were kind of the wave bandwidth was very erratic. The signal strength were very erratic. So what in this case does is we collaborate with the hospital. The hospital provided dongles to the patient's home so that they ensured that the signal strengths are constant. We're using the dongle, and which was kind of very efficient in transmitting the data. So that took care of the bandwidth issue with respect to the smaller towns. So this is one challenge. So what we do precisely before we really go and deploy devices in any hospital, whether it's remote or even in the larger towns, we do what is known as signal strength analysis of that in that particular area where the device needs to be monitored. We do a small pilot for say 2 to 3 weeks, continuously with support from our delivery operations and technical operations to see how stable the Wi-Fi is, how the data transmission happens over a period of 1 or 2 weeks. Only when we are confident that yes, this has been working well, we go ahead on a commercial deployment. And we also ask the hospital to have standby arrangements with respect to the Wi-Fi and other systems, even power, as a matter of fact. So because in
Yes.
smaller towns, you would understand there's a power failures also. So we, of course, most of the hospitals do have generator, etc. But we ensure that we ensure that the hospitals provide the UPS even to the servers of the hospital, so that in case of a power shutdown, the data is not lost.
Exactly. And the other area I wanted to speak is one in terms of you mentioned in a bit that this will work with all HIS systems, whichever are compliant. Now, my question is one on the regulatory compliances part, since healthcare has even different geographies have multiple regulations. So, from your solution perspective, one, conforming with all the multiple regulations, and two, specifically for India, last year we had the telemedicine things, and there is a medico legal aspect
Yeah.
to the telemedicine thing. So, how does the solution take care of that aspect?
Yes, from a regulatory standpoint, our device is cleared by the US FDA because our devices are deployed even in the US hospitals. So we comply to all the US FDA regulations with that. We comply to the, as far as Indian regulations are concerned, we also comply to the ISO 13485 quality management system guidelines. We comply to all the regulations that are there in the Indian geography that we currently are need to follow. And with respect to the telemedicine and the medical legal case, yeah, all the data that is generated by our system is stored in the hospital server. So the data belongs to the hospital. We have no access to the patient information or patient demo. We do absolutely no access to that. It is all in the patient, in the hospital cloud or in the hospital servers. And uh, so that way, what happens is since we don't have access to the patient information, all the information resides with the hospital, and it's up to them as to how they take a backup or how they archive that particular information within the hospital environment. And most of the hospitals, let me tell you, are following these guidelines very strictly, and we get questioned for the cyber security and patient safety information, etc. aspects, and we provide them all the necessary data that we have. And so most of the hospitals that are deployed are pretty comfortable with that. So there's no kind of apprehension with respect to the compliance to the regulatory environment, as well as even our current, since we are a Japanese company now, as Murata, even our we are trying to comply with the Japanese regulations, because very soon we'll be marketing them in that geography as well. So we are very uh, aware of the requirements of the regulatory environments and the changing regulatory. And specifically in India, we know that every time the regulatory environment is changing, and for the good in a way, and becoming stricter. But we are very much aware, and we have a very able consultant to help us in these aspects, to provide us with all the guidance and see that we're in line with the regulatory requirements of the country.
Okay, thanks. There's another area which is very critical, especially in the Indian context. I want to understand one, the pricing mechanism of the solution, and second, if you look at the Indian context, so there is one, private healthcare and some of the deployments which you mentioned, Max or Columbia Asia, which are big private players. But in India, significantly has a large public healthcare system, which is significantly subsidized by the government, and their cost of economics is a concern. So, keeping that in mind, how have you worked out the pricing mechanism so that this monitoring solution can be more universally available?
Yes, see, precisely when the device was conceived, it was conceived with the India geography in mind. And we all know that India is a very price sensitive market. Has been over the decades, it has been a very price sensitive market. Health insurance is also not there for most of the people. Of course, now recently the government has started all that, but yet a lot of patients pay from their pocket. So very aware of that particular aspect with respect to the product. So when we are selling the product, we have been pretty uniform. We don't make a differentiation whether it is a private hospital or whether it's a government hospital. We want to be very fair to everyone. So what we have done is, and we also know, as I said, the price sensitive market, the ability to pay. So what we have done is we have kind of not, we generally go on what is known as a subscription model for this particular thing. And most of the hospitals are aware of the subscription model. We also use it in our personal life with respect to any of our uh, entertainment as well as telecommunication methods. So we follow the subscription model. So by virtue of following the subscription model, what happens is the hospitals actually doesn't do a payout cash upfront capital payment to us. We charge on a monthly rental model, charge at a particular nominal fee for the use of the device, irrespective of the utilization they have. So that's pretty acceptable, which comes to very nominal charges, even if the patient is charged. If some hospital charges the patient also, it's very nominal, and so it doesn't really hit the patient's pocket very hard. So we came up with this model specifically for the Indian geography. What we follow in our other geographies is very different, but keeping in mind the sensitivities of the customers and the paying capacity of the customers and the apprehension of the hospitals with respect to that, irrespective whether it's a private hospital or a government sector hospital or any other small trust hospital, charitable hospital, we kind of ensure that we follow a very uniform model of subscription, which makes it very easy for anyone. So that's the simplest solution we found out, and it has been widely accepted by most of our customers, and they find it very useful because they do see value. And when they see the value coming out of what we offer to the customers in terms of continuous monitoring, reduction in code blue scenarios, saving patients' lives at very pretty critical times, getting information of the patient before the patient reaches the hospital via the ambulance deployment. So they see value in it and they have absolutely no issues with the subscription model. They find it's a win-win situation. Patient safety is taken care of, the cash outflow of the hospital is kind of taken care of. They don't have to really pay much. At the same time, they are getting all the information that they need, which is in line with the regulations. And there are until now there have been no medical legal challenges we have faced, nor the hospital has faced. So it has been a pretty win-win situation from all standpoints, with call it the patient, call it the hospital, the nurses, the clinicians, and of course us. All of us find it's a very win-win situation for all the 4 or 5 stakeholders in the ecosystem.
Okay, and one more thing I wanted to understand is what is the longevity of the device? Can it be used only with one patient, or can it be used multiple times with more than one patient?
Okay, the device per se is a small adapter and a sensor which is placed on the patient chest with some of the adapter and some of the electrodes that are placed, sensor electrodes that are placed on for measuring the ECG. That and the bedside monitor is a 1:1 combination. So you use it on a patient for say 8 to 12 hours, 24 hours. We have used it on patient for even 36 days, 48 days. That has been the longevity of the use of the patient. It can be used. And once it has been removed from the patient, you just connect it to the small electrode patches which the hospital use for ECG. So it doesn't, that's something consumable the hospital has. So once we remove the adapter and the sensor from the patient's body, you can put the sensor for charging with a normal type B-type connector or a C-type connector, and then you can clean it with alcohol and use it on another patient. So a hospital, for example, one of the hospitals in Bangalore I just mentioned about, they have got 40 devices with them. So they are able to kind of monitor 40 patients at a time, and they keep moving the patients after doing the proper care of cleaning up with the alcohol, wiping with the alcohol, and cleaning the device. They use it on another patient after charging the sensor. So this device can be used on multiple patients, but one sensor, one adapter, and one bedside monitor is a 1:1 ratio. It can't be used simultaneously on multiple patients.
And in terms of health-wise, is there any concern since it's a sensor for patients who have stents or other implants in bodies, can there be a frequency complication?
Uh, no, that has all has been kind of tested during the before we actually launched the product, and those were certain requirements that come from the US FDA requirements as well. So all those validation studies with respect to, as you said, whether if the patient has a pacemaker or a patient has a stent, does it affect, whether there are other Bluetooth devices around which can actually impact this particular data transfer and all those kind of studies and validations have been done. Those were part of our design file that was submitted to the regulators before we got approval for going with this product into the commercial. So all that has been taken care of. So there's absolutely no fear with respect to any of those aspects that you mentioned.
And now, looking at more in the business terms, how have you? What is the go-to market? The way you approach the hospitals and clinics who are primarily. How have you been doing it?
So we are actually currently going direct. We don't follow the channel partner process at the moment. We have a very small sales team because we are just a fledgling, I can say, at the moment. But we do have plans of hiring more people as we go ahead, as our footprint increases across the geography. Currently, our geography, we are focused mainly on the northern part of the country and the southern part of the country. But we are now slowly expanding into the western region, central region, and slowly in the eastern part of the country as well. What we are doing is we are currently focusing through direct our sales teams. We have a small sales team, and as we hire more, we directly approach the hospitals. And ours is mostly a top-down approach when we do the sales because it is a concept that we need to sell. To be honest with you, this need of monitoring outside the ICU was not really felt at any point of time. Of course, now we got a lot of competitors also who are kind of trying to get entry into this particular area. But we were the first to kind of identify this need in the niche area of step down monitoring or ward monitoring and continuous monitoring, that to wireless monitoring. It is a concept that we need to sell to the hospitals, and when we do give a demo and explain the concept to the hospital CXOs and the clinicians, the senior clinicians, etc., they really like the concept. And then what we do is after we give a demo after the explanation, maybe a PowerPoint explanation initially, then followed by demo of the device, how it actually works. So that is kind of the icebreaker. It kind of resolves all the doubts that they have. And then we also further to strengthen their views on this particular product, that this really works. As I said earlier, we do offer them a 2 or 3 week pilot, wherein it's a no cost pilot to the hospital, where we do a pilot at the hospital. We involve the entire hospital ecosystem. We do appropriate trainings to the nurses. We deploy. We take help from their IT team. We involve everybody in the ecosystem. We take their IT help. We take the biomedical engineering team. We take their clinicians. We take the nurses. And anyone who's interested to know about the product, even the procurement team, sometimes the finance team, everybody kind of we involve everybody in the entire pilot, so they actually get to see the value it provides. Then there are definite metrics that is monitored during the pilot as to how the hospital has really benefited, which were the patients they were put, how long the patients were monitored, what were the challenges, what were the alarms that were raised, which were addressed by the nurses, which otherwise they would have perhaps missed if the monitoring was not there. Because if the patient is in the ward and the nurse is in the room, unless there is a distress button pressed by the nurse or the attendant, by the patient or the attendant, the nurse wouldn't know, as unless he actually goes to the patient bedside on a routine rounds. But here you are continuously getting the information, so the alarms are coming, and we use those as some of those measurement yardsticks to see how the patient and the hospital has benefited by using this. And this kind of once the pilot is kind of over, we have 99% have ended with a commercial deal because they do see value in it, and they say yes, this is something that we are looking for. So we start with one particular use case, and then when we explain to the hospital the various use cases which I explained to you in a while ago, like maybe the ambulance use case or a home hospital use case or a e-monitoring use case, that is the hub and spoke model that I mentioned. Then once there's a confidence in one particular use case, then the use case expands. So what we do, we are able to expand our footprint within the hospital from one use case to multiple use cases. and also maybe by word of mouth from one branch of the hospital to the other branch, or maybe different hospitals also, because all the hospitals are very well connected. So as I said, currently we are doing a small pilot in Columbia Asia Hospital in one of the smaller towns in the country. So there, the nurses and the doctors are very happy with the way we explained to them, and then they said, "Oh yeah, I really want this particular product to do a pilot." So that's how the pilot started there.
So during this pilot, the sort of training of the nurses and the clinicians and even the doctors happened during this pilot time.
Actually, the training is a continuous process for us. Let me explain this. During the pilot, definitely yes, because it's complete new concept, so no one is aware of it. So we need to do the handholding, not just the training on how the device works, but how to connect it and all that. Although it's very simple, anyone uses a smartphone today is very comfortable using this particular device, so it's that easy. So, however, even after the pilot is over and the commercial deployment happens, we don't stop our training program. We also have a training program at regular intervals. During the pilot, the training program is there. During the commercial deployment initial period, there is a training program, and then we have a cyclical training program depending on the hospital requirements. We all are aware that hospitals have a large attrition or a turnover in terms of nursing staff, and even if there's no turnover of the nursing staff, there is a lot of change of their function as the days goes by. Their roster changes, their department changes. So we take this as a continuous training process program with the hospital, and many times in couple of hospitals, we have partnered with the hospital QA and created a certification program wherein we do the training of the nurses. They undergo a small evaluation, and we provide them a certificate that they are Vios trained. Certification is given, so that way the nurses are kind of, that adds to their perhaps their qualification that they are Vios trained, and we keep this as a continuous process so that at no point of time there is lack of any awareness on how the device to be used. Having said that, I would also like to say that we do also have a support system. We have a 24 by 7 call center. We provide the L1, L2 support, and even the L3 support if required. So the support system post sales service is also there. It's not that we just hand over the device, do the training, and walk off. We are constantly in touch with the customer at all point of times through the account manager, through the delivery operations team, and also through the call center. We get the inputs on if there were any calls or any queries coming from the customers. So that way it's a continuous contact program is there, so that way we are able to build the relationship with the hospital, and that is the reason that we have been successful even in remote places outside the Indian geography, which I mentioned, where at any point of time, if they could call us up despite the time zone difference, at any point of time when they needed any help, we had people to call them back, address their issues, and resolve any doubt, any challenges that they had, if at all.
Okay, so one thing just came to mind as a use case you mentioned about the home hospitals and the non-critical monitoring. If we look at last 1.5 years during these COVID pandemic times, a lot of people, at least for the non-critical things, have been a little hesitant in coming directly to the hospital. So,
Yes.
have you seen more of these use cases emerging for a remote monitoring solution like this from home environment?
Yeah, see, I just want to clarify one point and remove any misconceptions if there are in the minds of the listeners. See, when I say home, our device is specified for home hospital. It's not pure play home. So I cannot ask the attendant of the patient or the patient himself to connect it to himself. We need a paramedical support or a doctor support to connect the device to the patient. So it is not actually a pure play home care device. It's a home hospital device. Like, for example, we have a terminally ill patient or a patient on dialysis who cannot go to the hospital, but he needs monitoring. There is a nurse to take care of the patient in the hospital, at the home. So the hospital provides a nurse to take care of the patient at the patient's home. So in such a scenario, we are able to deploy a device on the patient so that the nurse is there to connect the electrodes properly on the patient's body, and also take care that the device doesn't kind of come off from the patient's body, because you really don't know how the patient or the patient attendant will be able to manage this. And this, although it's a very simple device, it is quite an expensive device, and it's on a subscription model too. So ultimately, the device has a cost, and any damage to device could be detrimental to the customer as well as us. So we ensure that it is always deployed, even if it is at a home, under the supervision of a paramedic or a doctor at the home of the patient. So it's a home hospital device. So in the COVID scenario that we had in the past 1.5 years, yes, we did get inquiries for deploying this in a home hospital scenario where the patient is perhaps terminally ill or having some challenges, and is the family is reluctant to send the patient home, patient to the hospital for any care, because already there is a comorbidity and COVID can bring out bigger challenges. So in such cases, yes, the device were placed on the patient's at the patient's home by the nurse, and she was there by the bedside of the patient, and the data was getting transmitted to the hospital, so that the doctor, the consultant, the nephrologist, or is able to monitor the patient constantly, or the oncologist is able to monitor the patient constantly and give clinical advice to the nurse on the drug administration. So that is the way this works. So it's not a purely home care device that we can just home care variable device, if I may say, where you can just give it to the patient and say, now you put it on and we'll monitor you. So perhaps that is not something that it does, or we recommend as well.
Okay, and one thing I'd like to know from the Murata perspective, what sort of R&D infrastructure you maintain for this?
Okay, so the R&D, basically the entire software R&D is done in India, in Bangalore. We have a very strong R&D team, very well experienced R&D team who have got years and years of experience in the healthcare sector. They have worked in various healthcare companies. They have worked in various IT companies in the healthcare verticals, etc. So the software R&D is totally done in India, and we all know that India is strong in this, even otherwise. So the entire software R&D is done here. We also have a small team working out of our US office, where the algorithm team is there. So the algorithm team works out of our US office, and the hardware team also currently works out of the US office that we have. So the development of the hardware is happening in the US. The algorithm development happens in the US. The software development happens in India. All three are amalgamated together, and then we do the whatever validation trials, etc., are done, and all those teeny weeny things that could crop up are kind of taken care of, and goes to the entire process that is defined as per the ISO guidelines with respect to the design and development. And then the product is actually goes for a regulatory approval through the FDA, and then after all the FDA approvals come, then only it is brought into the market for commercial sale. Just wanted to add here, although our device was ready pre-FDA approval in India, and we could have perhaps even tried using it, we were very conscious of the decision, and we didn't use the device until we got the US FDA clearance, and then only we launched the product in the Indian market.
Okay, great. And lastly, if we look a little forward to the next 12 to 18 months, from your perspective, product wise, what would be the key focus initiatives that you plan to take?
Our primary area is to provide this monitoring solution to as many hospitals as possible, because there's definite value that the hospital has by continuously monitoring patients outside of the ICU. Simple reason: everybody in this entire in the value chain of the hospital benefits by this. If a patient is moved out of the ICU a couple of days earlier, the hospital can get in more patients into the ICU, can do more surgical procedures, so that benefits the hospital. If the patient moves outside the ICU, then he pays less for his ICU stay if he's paying from his pocket too. And even if the cost of the ward plus our device is much, much less than the cost of the stay in the ICU per se. So that also kind of becomes beneficial to the patient from a financial standpoint. So both gain, the hospital gains by the increase in ICU turnover, more revenue. The patient gains by saving some money by moving out of the ICU maybe a couple of days earlier than what otherwise he would have. And yet we monitor. The best part is, even if he moves out of the ICU, the ICU in charge, the doctors everywhere are sure that they are not losing sight of the patient. The patient can be in the ward and yet be monitored in the ICU. because the central station monitor could be kept in the ICU intensivist room, and he can be monitored. So that takes care of that. So this value is something that we are trying to tell to the various hospitals across the country over a period of time, and that is our primary objective. That this is a device that eases the workflow, data loss is minimized, error in data capturing is lost because continuous monitoring. Nurse shift timings, the data can be lost, information transfer can be lost during the shift changes. Nurses go on leave, there is less staff during night shift, there are less staff during festivals. You don't have to fear about any of this thing. If the device is put on the patient can be monitored anywhere. We also have a mobile app that works on the Android as well as the iOS, where even if the patient, the nurse or the doctor is not in the hospital, he can open his mobile app and actually see the patient's vitals. So this improves the workflow of the hospitals, and operationally it reduces the cost for the hospital significantly by perhaps they can have maybe one third the number of nurses in night shift or something like that, so that this monitoring can take care of all the patients on whom they are connected. So our primary goal is to kind of provide this kind of information to as many hospitals as possible. We have been successful with whatever we have done until now. So our sales strategy is to expand this particular footprint by providing this particular value proposition to the customer, and then take it forward as we go ahead. So we are going stepwise. Because we are, as I said earlier, we do have a small team which we will going to add in the days to come, but we are going very methodically, stepwise, connecting in each region, connecting various key hospitals, key doctors, and then taking it forward, getting some success there through pilots and commercials, and then slowly, step by step, expanding our footprint. I hope I answered all your questions and satisfactorily. If there are any doubts or anything, let me know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfectly. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much.